Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar, Olympus, Safety and Security Leveraging Technology. My name's Jason Stegent. I will be your moderator for today's session. Today's webinar is brought to you by Netsync Network Solutions. They are a Cisco Gold partner. We run a lot of these webinars together. Today's presenter is going to do a fantastic job. A few housekeeping notes before we get started, just to make sure everybody maximizes their time today, makes the best use of their webcasting experience. We will be in and out in 60 minutes or less. We guarantee it. Plan accordingly, obviously. We're recording today's session, which means that within the next 24 hours, it'll be available on demand. So if you're joining us, thanks again for joining us. You'll get a link to the on-demand version so you can reinforce what you learned today. If you weren't able to make it live, no worries. You can see what you missed. So be on the lookout for that email within the next 24 hours. With regards to personalizing your webcast experience, that means a lot of different things. So one of the common questions we always get is, hey, the slide deck, is there any way I can view it in full screen mode? Every window that you see up has min-max options. So if you want to view that slide deck in full screen mode, if you want to move it around, bend it, stretch it, you can do that with every single window that is up there in the webinar environment. So when we talk about personalizing your webcast experience, we really mean view it the way that you want to view it. In terms of audio, there is no dial-in option for today's attendees. You're going to be hearing the webinar, rather, the audio, through your PC speakers or through your mobile device. We are mobile ready all the way around. If you're in a cubicle-based environment, we always recommend headphones. If the audio is not loud enough for you for some reason, make sure that the volume on your PC is up. That's probably the most common thing we see. People say, hey, I'm having a little bit difficulty hearing things. But when we find out, when we peel the onion back, find out what the problem is, it's that typically their volume isn't up. So make sure that the volume's up. You should be able to hear this crystal clear. And then we already went through the visual. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. We want you guys touching your keyboard. Any questions you have for today's presenter, Mike, today's presenter typically gets a lot of questions. If you have any, send them in. You'll see the Q&A field or the Q&A box under the speaker box. Simply type in your questions, click submit. We'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of today's session. Finally, along the bottom, you'll see a number of different icons that enable you to do a number of different things. Like I mentioned earlier, you can min-max all the windows. Those are associated with icons. You can share this session through social media channels. If you have some folks in your network that you think would get value out of today's webinar, go ahead, share it through LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can email out of this platform as well. You'll see a resource icon. It's the one that looks like a paperclip. Netsync is hosting some content within that icon. Just click on it, and then you can download that to make this more of a multi-touch session. And then finally, if you have any questions, you'll see the FAQ window, or if you need to troubleshoot something, if you're having any technical difficulties. Pretty sure you won't have any, but in case you do, you'll see that support chat widget. You can chat with the support agent, and they can fix any challenges that you may be having. So I'm about to hand it over to today's presenter. Before I do, I wanted to make a brief introduction. His name's Mike Griffin. He's a collaboration practice manager at Netsync Network Solutions. Mike and I have done a number of these together. Like I said earlier, he's going to do a fantastic job. He's got over 20 years experience designing, installing, and aiding clients in planning for the future growth of collaboration solutions. So he is perfectly positioned to deliver today's presentation. He's got a history of collaboration solutions for large clients, public school districts, governmental entities, and other public sector clients as well. And then he's got a number of certifications that really make him a subject matter expert on today's topic. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand the floor over to Mike. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. So when we talk about Olympus, we developed this solution because we've seen a lot of challenges both in private entities and public sector clients where in the wake of recent tragedies of school shootings and emergencies and incidents, we needed to be able to bring all of these different point security products that exist in the market together so that they work harmoniously when we have an emergency or an incident. So what we've seen out there is a lot of organizations have elected to use technology for these types of incidents and emergencies, but they typically are disjointed, right? You might have one group out there that buys a specific technology and a different group that buys a different technology for this type of emergency or incident preparedness, but they don't really talk together when we have an emergency. You might have two different interfaces, you might have two different groups of notifications, you might have two different types of functions, features, or even more than that. And really the goal of Olympus is to overcome the challenge of how do we allow technology to work together harmoniously in this type of incident or emergency and have an automated workflow that just flows automatically. So when we go to why Olympus, ultimately the goal here is a multi-step approach, right? We have some sort of incident, we have some sort of emergency, we might have different ways to alert or notify or initiate the emergency, and that could be a button on a phone, it could be a physical panic button, it could be automated data such as weather data or gunshot detection sensors or fire alarms. It might be a trigger off of a mobile device or off of a badge or whatever the different input methods are. Once we get that input to understand that there is an emergency or an incident, then we need to be able to have an automated workflow that does a series of actions, right? And those actions could be closing doors, locking doors, coming over overhead speakers, hitting a strobe to notify folks that might have earbuds in or that might be hearing impaired. We might need to take over screens. We might need to send messages to the population, whether that be through a mobile device or through a laptop or a screen or a phone, email, text, all these different types of notifications and automated actions. It's really the goal of Olympus to be able to bring all of that together so that when we have an emergency, everything just works from an automated perspective on the technology side so that the human element can focus on saving human lives and let the technology take care of all the automated actions of being able to control the situation and notify the situation and being able to give data and visibility to on-site personnel and security personnel and first responders. So really that is the goal of Olympus. So at the end of this, our outcomes really are we want to be able to have a myriad of different inputs that go into the solution. And then once we have inputted and from an automated or manual standpoint that there is an incident or emergency, bringing all that together to send an automated workflow out so that we notify, that we take action, that we have visibility, that we can respond to the emergency or the incident quickly and efficiently with thorough communication for everybody that needs to be involved. And then also locking down and isolating where this incident came from and how do we address it. How many people are in that area? All of those different things are part of the Olympus solution. And with that, we can move into the demo. So give us just 1 sec and we'll get that wrapped up and get the demo started.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the demo. So as we talked about in the overview, there are different ways that we can trigger events or emergencies through the solution. There are automated ways and there are manual ways. Some of the automated ways would be things such as gunshot detection sensors, weather data. We can leverage fire alarm sensor information. Those are just some examples, but once those automated things take place, a series of automated actions can occur. Now, from a manual standpoint, we can trigger the emergency or the incident by a number of different ways. One would be the IP phone. You can see here on the side of the phone that we've got 4 buttons programmed: panic, clear panic, open door, and close door. Those can be programmed however you want on a per phone, per campus, per building solution or basis. But for purposes of demonstration today, we're going to go through the panic. Another way that we can initiate an incident or an emergency is via an HID badge replacement. So this would just replace your standard access control badge that you use to get through doors today. We don't necessarily have to replace the back-end access control system, but this badge is also Wi-Fi enabled. You can see that it does have a battery. It's pretty light. And we can put a faceplate on here to put your picture, your QR code, your name, etc. And then we've got 3 buttons that can be programmed. These can be programmed on a per campus, per building basis. For example, you could have the red button trigger a active shooter event. The yellow button could be for medical emergency, a fight in a classroom, whatever you want. And then the green button could be to mark yourself and the folks around you as safe. Now, when you press a button, it also has the capability to show on a map where that button was pressed within the facility and who pressed it, and of course, which button they pressed. And once they press that button, a series of automated actions can take place, and I'll show you that as part of the demo here shortly. Another way we can trigger a manual event is via a panic button on the wall here. Let me show you this. That red panic button there on the wall can be leveraged. Now, you're not going to want to put that in a classroom. You're going to, or a main hallway or something of that nature, but maybe underneath a desk, in an office, whatever makes most sense. And then finally, the last way that we can trigger an event is through the mobile application as well. So you can see these are all the events that have taken place for my permission view. However, this can be filtered based upon whatever your permissions are. And then you can trigger, excuse me real quick, you can trigger a new incident by hitting the new button there, and then you'll see a predetermined list of all the emergencies or the incidents that you're allowed to see and trigger. Now again, this is on a per user basis. What their permissions are is what they're going to see. So I'm going to go ahead and do the demo. Let me go back here to the card. So when I do this, a lot of things are going to happen, and they're going to happen very quickly. So I'm going to trigger the incident. You're going to see everything that takes place, and then we're going to go back and review what happened. So I'm going to hit the red button for an active shooter. It takes a few seconds.
This is an emergency lockdown alert. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately. The police have been notified and are en route. Wait for the all clear.
So we saw a lot of different things happen right there. Let me turn this down a little bit. So the first thing we saw was that the door closed and locked. The overhead speaker came loud and said what the emergency was, what the instructions are to everybody. We saw the strobe at the front of the room flash for the hearing impaired or possibly folks that might have earbuds in or headphones on. You saw my phone, or maybe you didn't see it, but you heard it, go off with a number of different alerts. And I'll show you here in a second what that looks like on a computer, a little bit bigger screen. But then we took over the screen in the classroom as well, the classroom or the office building or whatever it might be. And we're showing physical security camera footage of right outside of the room. We're also showing a local news feed, and then we're scrolling instructions along the bottom that tells folks what's going on and what they need to do. Now from a notification standpoint on a PC or a mobile device, let me actually clear this incident to get it back to normal.
Sending broadcast.
Emergency lockdown has been lifted. This is an all clear.
Alrighty. So you see when we cleared the incident, the emergency, the screen went back to normal. The door unlocked, the door automatically opened. We came back over the overhead. And then finally, let me show you what this looks like in WebEx Teams here. So as you can see, I got a notification. Let me close this out. I got a notification in Cisco WebEx Teams that said, here's what's going on. Here's an audio file of the emergency, basically what was played on the overhead speaker, and then all the information about the incident and what the instructions are. That also came across my mobile device on my WebEx Teams and through my mobile application for the Olympus solution. So that's the reactive side of the demonstration, but it's important to understand that there are lots of different inputs and outputs for the Olympus solution. We've shown you a number of them today, but there are other options as well. We can integrate into lighting, into fire control, like I mentioned at the beginning of the demonstration, automated sensors such as gunshot detections and smoke detectors. The outputs can be everything that you saw here, along with we can send emails and texts and social media updates. Lots of different ways to provide both those inputs and outputs, and from a manual and an automated perspective. So that kind of wraps up the reactive side of the demonstration. I also did want to show you more of the proactive side of the demonstration as well. So what we've noticed is a lot of these school shootings where these kids brought guns to school, they talked about it on social media prior to the event. So what we've developed is a social media mining application that goes out and looks for specific keywords based upon a proximity. And what I mean by that is you could load in all the addresses of all of your locations into the Olympus solution, set up a series or grouping of keywords and tie it to those addresses. Now you can have the same group of keywords for all the addresses, or you can have a separate keyword grouping for each address or multiple, it's up to you. But once you have those keywords and you have the addresses loaded in, you're gonna be able to specify a proximity in miles. So the solution will say, if I see these keywords within 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles of this address, I want to know about it and be notified, and then possibly have some sort of automated action happen. So we're in Twitter here. The keyword grouping that we've set up is anything that includes Netsync and gun. So it can be an entire post, a paragraph, multiple paragraphs, it doesn't matter. But we have the ability to do and or operators. And what I mean by that, it could say, show me anything that comes up within the proximity range that includes this word or this word or this word. Or you could say, show me anything within the proximity range that includes this word and this word. So for us, it's Netsync and gun have to be in the post, and it has to be within 5 miles of our physical address. So I'm going to go ahead and tweet that. And then the way this will work, I'm going to show you the strobe because it takes up to 60 seconds for the social media mining application to find this within the proximity. But once it does, for purposes of the demonstration, we're going to come over the overhead speaker and say that we found a social media alert, and then we're also going to flash the strobe and then send a message through Cisco WebEx Teams. Now, in a real life scenario, you're going to just want to send that message discreetly to a group of personnel, and that could be through WebEx Teams, it could be through text, email, however you prefer. Here we go.
A new social media alert has been detected.
So if I come back to the screen, I'll show you what that looks like in WebEx Teams. You can see that I now have a new social media alert. Again, we can download the WAV file that was played on the overhead speaker. And then we see what the actual content of the post was. And then we see a link to the social media post. So you can go right to it and view the content, the author, all of those pertinent details. So it's important to note that the solution is both reactive and proactive, and it's highly customizable. And we want to be able to leverage the existing technology that you've already invested in as much as possible. So if you've already invested in access control, if you've already invested in physical security cameras or gunshot detection sensors or fire control systems, we want to integrate to those to bring them into the Olympus solution as additional inputs. So when we dive into your specific scenario, we'll do a series of meetings to identify what your goals and visions are, and then pull up and do our due diligence on the technology that you've already implemented and deployed and purchased. So that pretty much wraps up the demonstration portion of this, and I think we'll go to back to Jason for questions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Great webinar. Had a number of questions that came in from the audience. We're going to get to as many of those as we can. A few housekeeping notes on the back end. Like I mentioned on the front of today's webinar, we are recording today's session. So if any of you folks missed us live today, no worries. You'll get a link to the on-demand version. If you're attending, thanks again. You'll be able to reinforce what you learned. So with that being said, Mike, let's get into these questions. We had a bunch of them. This first one is coming from Suzanne. Suzanne wants to know, does the solution require all the components you've spoken about, or can it be a subset of the features?
Yeah, so it can absolutely be a subset of the features. A lot of customers and organizations choose to kind of do a crawl, walk, run approach, where they start with the core infrastructure, the core components, and layer on features and functionality over time in a multi-phased approach. So you can absolutely pick and choose what works best for you in your organization.
Dan wanted to know, we've got a question coming from Dan. He's here in Houston. Does the screen in the classroom have to be a smart board, or can it be an LED TV?
It can be an LED TV. As a matter of fact, it can be any kind of display, including a projector, as long as it has an available HDMI port.
Okay. Awesome. We've got another one. This is coming from Shelly. Shelly wants to know, Mike, does your solution work with Axis physical security cameras?
It does, and as a matter of fact, in the demonstration, the video stream that you saw coming through the Cisco WebEx board was an Axis camera.
Okay. This one is coming from Alan. Alan says, Mike, great webinar. Thanks, Alan. Alan wants to know, is the social media feature an off-the-shelf product you have integrated, or is it a Netsync product that you have developed on your end?
That is a Netsync developed product, specifically developed for Olympus and this overall solution.
Okay, great. So it's pretty brief. If anybody has any other questions, we can tackle them. If not, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Mike, is there anything you want to add on the back end to this in terms of next steps or getting in touch with you or anybody on the team over at Netsync before I wrap up with some final notes on my end?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's interested and wants to learn more about it or have more one-on-one question and answer session, I'm happy to do that. Just reach out to us in the information that was provided in the webinar, and we can schedule a meeting and get you going. I appreciate everybody's time today.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you again, if you look at the resource section, it's the tabs at the bottom. It's got the paperclip icon. There is an Olympus piece of content, more or less a solution brochure. We've seen that a number of you folks have downloaded it today. If you haven't, while you're in the environment, click on that paperclip icon, download that content. It'll give you more details about Olympus and how it could work for you and your environment. Thanks again for attending. Be on the lookout, by the way, in the next few weeks for information on Netsync's next webinar. The date is to be determined. The topic's to be determined, but I know that they're racking their brain right now determining what the next topic's going to be. So be on the lookout for an email in the next few weeks on how you can access that. Hope you can join us for that one as well. But I wanted to thank everybody again for attending. Mike, enjoyed it. Let's do it again. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thanks a bunch.